You've likely heard that you should be careful to only spend your reserve funds on actual reserve projects. That's great in theory, but how do you apply that on a month-to-month basis in all the inevitable small decisions that you face? And how can you safely minimize your reserve funding requirements so your journey to the future isn't costing you any more than absolutely necessary? And what is a typical reserve funding rate? What do you do if you're way behind? And what do you do with your reserve funds when they're approaching or exceeding the amount that's insured at your local bank? Well, in this portion of our Roadmap webinar, we'll arm you with solutions. So day by day, through the year, you can be making wise reserve decisions that you won't later regret. And now let's move on to the examples. And Coley, are you up for examples?
Sure. Yeah.
Take them. Off to you.
Let's start with one of the most common questions we get. Is a reserve project a reserve expense or an operating expense? We do cover that question in detail in an entire webinar on its own, our Reserve Studies Program 101, which you can find on our website or our YouTube channel. But let me summarize the answer in the next few slides. Think about it like this. There's a 3-part test that every reserve component must pass. 1, that it's a common area responsibility. 2, that it can be reasonably anticipated. And 3, that its cost is significant to the association. Every component in your reserve study needs to pass this 3-part test. And remember, that 3-part test is outlined in those National Reserve Study standards. But let's get back to the question you face on a regular basis. How do you know if something is a reserve expense or an operating expense? The answer is yes, if you see if the project is listed in your reserve study, or if the project passes that 3-part test and you confirm with your reserve study provider. The answer is maybe if you don't see that particular project in the reserve component list, but it's related, significant, or if it's a maintenance project that extends the component's useful life. But again, make sure you check with your reserve study provider so you can really make sure you have clear guidance on this. Next, consider if the expense affects the component's remaining useful life. That means a minor service call to a boiler is not a reserve project, but replacing the igniter system that extends the boiler's remaining useful life by 5 years, that's a legitimate reserve expense. So the bottom line is that if you think you should spend reserves on a project and you're unsure for any reason, reach out to your reserve study provider. You can ask them questions, even the person who's doing that boiler service. Ask them, is this a service that is extending its life? If it's not, well, then you kind of have your answer there, but you should check with your reserve study provider. Let me show you how this works. Here's an example with the component list. All of the projects listed are pretty clear. All the normal things are here, the description, the useful life, the remaining useful life, and the current cost. But suppose your pool heater fails. You see a pool resurface component, the second one there on the list, but no pool heater component. From what you've just learned, replacing the pool heater, or pool filter for that matter, isn't automatically a reserve expense just because it's related to the pool. Check with your reserve study provider. There may be a reason it was excluded, or they may support the expenditure from reserves, and specifically add it to your component list in the next update. It's never in your best interest to guess. Too many properties gradually deplete their reserves by spending those limited funds on non-reserved projects. Here is interested in saving their association some money. How do you safely do that? The biggest way to save money is by avoiding deferred maintenance, like that asphalt project and roofing project from my example just a few slides ago. Get projects done on time. Don't let them grow on you. But you're probably wondering, are there some projects that are okay to delay? Do you need to do all projects on time? No, you don't need to do all projects on time. Not all reserve projects are the same. Projects fail differently. Some are okay to defer, and some you should really do on a schedule. It's okay to defer an inconsequential component when cash is tight. It's okay to stop and not spend reserves and let that asset fail. That might be like an exercise machine in the gym that nobody uses, or the water heater in the pool restroom that's rarely used. So red means it's okay to stop and reconsider later. You can live without it for a little while, but you want to think twice about reevaluating any obsolescence projects, doing the ones that have true merit for the association, and deferring the not needed right now projects. If the perimeter wood fence is old but still pretty firm, there's no need to replace it until it gets a bit wobbly. It's the protection and catastrophic projects that you want to make sure you do on time. Those are protection projects like when you paint your wood, steel your asphalt. They protect the underlying surface, very expensive siding or the asphalt base structure, or catastrophic projects like the hot water boiler for the entire building or the entry gate or lobby entry mechanism. Don't delay those projects. Those are the ones that will get real expensive or cause hardships if you delay. Can you imagine if the water heater for the whole building goes out? I'm sure many of you have had that happen. Green means go. Just a reminder, deferred projects don't save the association any money. Those projects still need to be done. And you have to be careful deferring only the safe projects because otherwise you'll cost the owners a bunch of extra money. Remember to contact your reserve study provider if you have any questions. Now, take a look. This asphalt photo is a classic example of a poor decision. Here's a protection project, a board that delayed doing their protective asphalt seal coat. And as a consequence, the expensive underlying driveway failed. Replacing the driveway cost them between 10 and 20 times the cost of that seal project that they delayed. This same is true for ironwork. You have to paint the ironwork for sure. Anybody else seen something that looks like this on their project? Sorry, Robert, I stopped.
Yeah, no. I look at this picture and I was like, what were these people thinking?
Right. Now, let's go ahead and look at that roof next with all those tarps. This was probably a really bad idea delaying this project, or this is like catastrophic for the association. If you're tempted to delay a project or are unsure, reach out to a subject matter expert like your roofer, painter, or your reserve study provider to find out if delaying is okay. So let me address the problem about what to do in the middle of the year when the cost in the reserve study doesn't match the proposals that you're getting. That happens. First, your bias should be to go ahead and do the project. The issue is caring for the property. Don't delay unnecessarily just because you've got a price mismatch on your hands. Remember how projects tend to be more expensive when delayed. In reality, some projects will be more expensive or less expensive than expected. If it's less expensive, the money will be used for other reserve projects. If it's more expensive, the money will come from other reserve projects. Again, just talk to your reserve study provider and make sure you update your reserve study with this new information, making your reserve study better each time and your reserve planning more accurate for future years. Now, next we're going to talk about capital improvements. Can you spend money to add things to your association? Remember that reserves are for ongoing deterioration, but not to buy new things. So if you're thinking about buying a new dock where one previously didn't exist, don't do that with your reserve funds. That's the key. But if the asset needs to be replaced, it's totally fine to do a natural upgrade like you see on the slide. Replacing an incandescent light with a fluorescent or LED, that might be more expensive but uses less electricity. So just remember, if the asset or project exists is the key distinction. Remember that reserves offset ongoing deterioration of existing assets. Reserves are not a slush fund to be used to buy new things for the association. If your boards ever have a question on this issue, they should reach out to their reserve study provider. Are you hearing?
Coley, I should be counting how many times you're saying the same thing. We might be up at 10, but that's a theme.
Driving that home.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about money next. Through the year, you're watching it month by month, or at least you should be. Here's the question, is if you should feel good about the amount of money you have in reserves, or if you've got a problem on your hands. Like with components, we devote an entire webinar to this issue, Reserve Studies 102, which again, you can find on our website and YouTube channel. The major point from that webinar is to measure reserve fund size by percent funded, not specifically cash balance. Champlain Tower South had about $700,000 in reserves, which sounds like a lot of money, until you understand that they had almost $10 million of deferred projects that needed to be done. They were only 7% funded. Percent funded tells us how well the reserve fund meets the needs of the association. Remember that the cost of deterioration is ongoing. Percent funded answers the question if you have enough reserves in the bank to do what you need to do, which happens when the amount you've been funding over the years keeps up with the ongoing deterioration at the association. Remember, like Mother Nature and Father Time, they're unstoppable forces. Percent funded is kind of like the world record pace line that you sometimes see in a swim race. It allows you to know how we're doing. A quick answer to what you're probably wondering is that 1/3 or 33% of associations have a significantly weak reserve fund. Not everyone. Many associations are doing okay or have a strong reserve fund, but it's that 1/3 in the weak range that makes all the news. This chart shows you why percent funded matters. This chart shows you can predict most special assessments. You can see them coming years in advance when you're looking at your association's percent funded. See how common special assessments are in the red columns on the left side of the chart, when the association is in the 0 to 30% funded range. But special assessments are infrequent in most of the yellow zones and are rare in the green zone. That's pretty powerful information you want your board to know. This is why tracking your reserves on a percent funded basis is more effective than just tracking your cash flow balance. But cash flow balance is still important. You don't want to have more than $250,000 in one financial institution or bank. Every bank only insures its deposits to $250,000. So if your reserve balance is approaching or exceeds $250,000, get some professional assistance. You're not trained to be a professional investment manager. There are many out there that specialize in community associations. I expect you're probably thinking, what's it take to adequately fund reserves offsetting ongoing deterioration? And the answer is to opt in about 25% of the total budget, like we show in this pie chart. Like I said earlier, owning and maintaining real estate is expensive. And remember, your choice is ongoing funding or a special assessment or loans. The costs aren't going to go away. It's worth spending a moment more on this. That's because with budgeted funding, every owner pays their fair share to offset deterioration that happened at the property over the time that they lived there. And in doing so, the funds will exist when needed to get those big, expensive projects done on time. And that means your reserves are strong enough and your percent funded is high enough that special assessments don't happen at your association, which is the goal. It's a great thing. And besides, remember that it's the board's job to budget for the sustainability of the association. I know some of you probably get distracted thinking about your association, that they're not putting close to the $25,000 or 25% of the total budget aside and wondering if it's even possible to do more. But I'll tell you that reserve funding is not too expensive. Even 25% of the total budget often works out to be the cost of a premium coffee per day. That's very affordable. If someone says they can't afford it, they're just plain wrong. Besides, another fact is that budgeting reserves funding is the least expensive way to pay for reserve projects over time. Your choice is how the owners pay for it, not if they will pay for it. So choose the least expensive option with budgeted funding. For a $250,000 roof project, owners will pay less than $250,000 due to the compound interest earned from the bank. A special assessment will pay directly for the expense. Your $250,000 special assessment goes straight to the roofer. But if you start thinking about a loan, remember that at current rates, it will take about $320,000 from the owners to pay back that $250,000 loan. Like we've said plenty of times before in this webinar, this is just another way that delayed just gets expensive. Budgeted funding will cost the owners less than a special assessment or a loan. Are you still bothered that this is going to mean a big increase for your association? Consider something we call the $10 solution. It likely took your association years or decades to get to an underfunded jam. Check with your reserve study provider. You usually can take a few years to get out of that jam If you consider raising your reserve funding by $10 per month per owner this year, and then another $10 per home per month the following year. In most cases, it just takes 2 to 5 years of those $10 increases to raise the reserve funding to a really sustainable level.
Well, Coley, that's fantastic information. When I think about it, I think $10 a month per year, that's a very doable increase. It's hard to say that our owners can't afford another $10 a month. And you do that for a few years, and your association turns from one that doesn't have enough money to one that does. At Association Reserves, we make the present less stressful and the future more secure. If you want to join us in this mission, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment down below on what you'd like to see us address in a future video. Let's plan for your best future.